Hi everybody, my name is Michelle, welcome back to my channel, and today I need to outline my novel for NaNoWriMo, and I also need to film a video for Vloctober, so ¿por qué no las dos? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to sort of go through my editing process as I'm doing it so that we can have more of like a conversation instead of me just like spewing information at you constantly like I always do. Now I do tend to edit a little bit differently with every project that I work on, but just as a general rule of thumb, I like to use a method called the fool's cap method, which I did not create, but I'll leave some information in the description if you want that described to you in further detail. But the basic idea of the fool's cap method is that the entire plot of your story, or all the important bits, should be able to fit on one sheet of yellow foolscap paper. Now, I don't have any yellow foolscap paper because I do not live in the 1970s, but notebook paper works just as well. Now, the reason that I generally prefer this outlining method as opposed to some others is that it provides you with an overall macro view of your story, which I think is really important. I feel like most people, when they think up an idea for a story, they start out with some concept of characters or setting, and from that, it's very easy to sort of surmise what you want to happen at the beginning of the book, but you don't always have the clearest idea of what happens after that, or where you want your characters to end up at the end, and why it's all important and how everything all connects together. So having to write it all out in a very limited amount of space really forces you to think through like what happens and what's important and why it's important. It's sort of like completing a circuit in your mind. Like you lay all the groundwork out and suddenly everything just connects together and you're just like, whoa, there's the story! This method also sort of prevents you from over-outlining, which I think can sometimes be just as detrimental as not having an outline at all. Like I know with me personally, like if I write a really detailed, long, specific outline with every single plot point that happens, I feel like I already wrote the story and I don't want to write it again, you know? So that's what the fool's cap method is about. It's about getting the basics down without going overboard. So the first step that I like to do is I like to take the front side of my paper and list out things like setting, plot, theme, genre, etc. So I'm gonna go do that and I'll go over them with you when I am done. I'm back! So I've completed the first side of my outline. You probably cannot see it at all because of the white balance, but trust me, it is filled out. So the story that I'm hopefully going to be writing during NaNoWriMo next month, if I don't get bogged down with work stuff, is a young adult contemporary that is centered around a small rural high school in the deep south, and it's going to be one of those like fake dating AU things that you see in fanfiction, but with original characters. So the first thing that I've written down about this story is the setting, which I just told you is a rural high school in the deep south. I'm thinking somewhere in like Alabama or Mississippi, but I don't know yet. I need to do more research, which is why I have it underlined on my outline. The next thing on my outline is POV, or point of view. This is going to be first person, second person, third person limited, or third person omniscient. If it's not one of those four, then good luck with that. Not only should you write down the POV of the story, but you should also write down why it needs to be told from that perspective. I find that a lot of times in trying to rationalize my choices for perspective, I realize that the story would be better if told in a different way. So this is a really important step, I think. Next up we have time, and this is basically just the amount of time during which your story takes place. This could be simple, like just a short, medium, or long, or you could give like a specific time frame if you know it off the top of your head. My story takes place within like a 2 to 3 month window. Next is the structure of your story. Pretty much all books, I feel like, are some variation on a hero's journey story, but within that you have stories that are based around characters, stories that are based around worlds, stories that are based around ideas, and stories that are based around events. My story would definitely be categorized as a character story, as it is literally only about the growth and personal development of my main character. Then we have style, which for me is a contemporary YA. This doesn't really apply to my story since I'm writing something based in the real world, but if you're writing like a fantasy or a sci-fi story, you might want to take note of the reality in which your story takes place. Next up, you want to write down your beginning hook, your middle build, and your ending payoff. These should be very short, very simple, 1 to 3 sentences at the most that you can build upon later. I'm not going to share mine with you because those are spoilers, but I'm sure you can figure out what that means for yourself. Next up I have the external genre, which is contemporary fiction. And then we have the external value at stake. There should be something at stake in every story. For me, that is one of my characters' personal safety and their ability to graduate. For you, it could be anything else. Then we have internal genre, so like what's happening within your character's heart and mind and soul. For me, that is self-discovery and personal growth. And then internal value at stake, which is what is on the line for your character personally. For me, that is my character's morals and their ability to stand up for what they believe in. You also want to take note of any obligatory scenes if you're writing genre fiction. I'm not, but if you were writing a mystery per se, you would want to make sure you had a MacGuffin or some red herrings or something like that. If you were writing a love story, you'd want to have romantic tension, maybe a first kiss, love scene, something like that. So if those apply, make sure you take note of any of those. Then what I think is probably the most important part of this step of outlining is a one-sentence summary of your book. If you cannot summarize your idea in one sentence, your plot is not fully realized. I will give you mine as an example, just to be nice. It is a straight boy fully immerses himself in LGBT plus culture and learns how to be a better ally. Something like that. And finally, theme. Theme is really important to figure out before you start writing. That way you can be really conscious of it and make sure you don't accidentally divert as your story progresses and your characters get more complicated and try and go off and do their own things. And that's about it for the first half of the outline. Next, you're going to want to fold your paper into thirds and label those thirds Act 1, Act 2, and Act 3. And then you expand on your beginning hook, your middle build, and your ending payoff that you wrote down on the front half of your page. And I'm going to do that now. And we're back. Also, our old pal the Sunshine line is back. So as I mentioned before, I literally used the sentences that I wrote on the other side of the paper for my beginning hook, my middle build, and my ending payoff as the first plot points in each of my acts that I have on this side of the paper. As usual, I already pretty much had the first act completely written out in my head, so that was the easiest part. But then I went into the final act. I feel like it's easier to write the beginning and then the end and then fill in the middle because the middle is the meatiest part and usually the most difficult part to work through. So yeah, I got Act 1 and Act 3 done and I tried to make sure that they mirrored each other in some sort of way. And after this is all done, I'm gonna go and highlight the inciting incident and the climax just to make sure that they directly correlate and line up with each other. That is definitely something you should look out for in the outlining process. And yeah, from there it's pretty much just filling in the details. I do think that every act should have a setup, a conflict, and some sort of a resolution, but that sort of just comes naturally if you know anything about story structure, and if you're trying to write a story, you generally do. But yeah, that's my completed outline. It took me like maybe 45 minutes or an hour to do from start to finish, so if you're not a big outline person, I think this is something that could potentially work for you. And even if you are the kind of person that likes to have a big detailed outline to work off of, I think that this is a good starting step that you can work off of and do further outlining later. In fact, I probably will do more outlining after this because I'm not 100% satisfied with everything just yet. But yeah, that's gonna about do it for this video. Feel free to let me know your outlining tips and tricks in the comments below, and if you are participating in NaNoWriMo, let me know what you're gonna be writing, and also add me as a buddy on the site, link in the description. As always, thank you so much for watching. Like, subscribe, and all that jazz, and I will see you tomorrow. Goodbye.